In this video, we're doing a full download on the state of artificial intelligence as of August 2026. Not the hype, not the sci-fi headlines, the actual data. How companies are making money from AI, why chips are the world's most fought-over resource, which countries are racing to build their own AI systems, and why robots are now actually working real jobs. Let's get into it, and welcome to the AI with Arun Show. So here's the framing for this whole video. By August 2026, AI has stopped being just a tech industry topic. It now touches four huge forces at once: how companies make money, who controls the chips that power AI, how countries compete for advantage, and how robots are showing up in real factories. We're going to walk through each of these one at a time, using real numbers from this year's industry reports. Think of this as your cheat sheet for understanding basically any AI headline you'll see for the rest of 2026. Let's start with businesses. 64% of companies globally are actively using AI in their day-to-day work. That's most companies. But here's the catch. Only 34% have actually rebuilt their business around it. What's the difference? Imagine a company that uses AI just to write emails faster. That's a bolt-on. Now imagine a company that rebuilt its entire product so an AI agent handles the whole customer order from start to finish, no humans needed in the loop. That's transformation. Most companies are stuck in the first category, layering AI onto old systems instead of rethinking how they work. That gap between using AI and being changed by AI is one of the defining stories of this year. Now let's talk numbers, because they're striking. 88% of company leaders say AI is already boosting revenue for their business. 87% say it's cutting costs. And 86% of companies plan to increase their AI budget again this year, on top of what they already spent. This is why AI spending isn't slowing down. Leaders are seeing real dollars and cents results, not just hype. But keep this in mind for the next slide, because there's a big gap between having money to spend and actually knowing how to manage what you build with it. Here's a concept that explains a lot of what's happening in enterprise software: the death of per-seat pricing. For years, software companies charged per human user. You pay for each employee logging in, kind of like a gym membership per person. But now, one AI agent can do the work that used to take 5 employees. If a company still charges per seat, it actually loses money as AI replaces those seats. So the industry is shifting to outcome-based pricing. Think of it like paying a contractor for a finished working kitchen instead of paying them by the hour. You pay for the result AI delivers, like tickets resolved or leads closed, not for how many people are logged in. This is a fundamental rewrite of how software companies make money. Here's the flip side of all that excitement. Over 80% of companies don't have mature systems to govern and monitor their AI agents. Think about what that means. These companies are letting AI systems make decisions, spend money, or talk to customers. But many don't have a solid process to catch mistakes or bad decisions before they cause damage. It's like handing someone the keys to your car without ever checking if they know how to drive. Because of this, companies are now scrambling to build dedicated AI governance teams, groups whose whole job is to test, monitor, and set guardrails for these autonomous systems before something goes wrong. Now let's follow the money at the top of the industry. The largest cloud and tech companies, the ones sometimes called hyperscalers, have committed over $600 billion in capital spending this year. More than $450 billion of that goes directly into AI infrastructure, specialized chips, massive data centers, and the high-speed networking that connects them all. But there's a shift happening. Investors used to reward companies just for growing fast. Now they want proof that this spending actually turns into profit. So the pressure is on these giants to show real returns, not just bigger data centers. Let's meet the AI models actually powering all of this. Broadly, there are two camps. On one side, US labs like Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google are building closed premium models you access only through their paid API. Think of it like eating at a high-end restaurant. You don't get the recipe, just the finished meal. Claude Fable 5 leads on complex coding tasks. GPT 5.6 focuses on coordinating multiple AI agents together. And Gemini 3.1 Pro is strong at understanding images, video, and text together. On the other side, Chinese labs like DeepSeek, Alibaba, and Zipu are releasing open weight models, meaning they hand you the actual recipe for free, so you can download and run the AI yourself. DeepSeek's newest model matches the coding performance of the expensive US models at a fraction of the cost. This split, expensive and closed versus cheap and open, is reshaping who can afford to build with AI. Here's a story that shows how tangled AI and politics have become. In June 2026, Anthropic launched Claude Fable 5, one of the most capable AI models for software engineering. But just 3 days after launch, the US government paused access to it under export control rules, the kind of rules normally used to stop sensitive military technology from reaching other countries. Access was restored about 3 weeks later, in July. Why does this matter? Because it shows that the most powerful AI models are now being treated like strategic assets, similar to fighter jets or advanced chips. Governments can and will restrict who gets to use them, even temporarily, based on national security concerns. This is one of the biggest disruptions of the year. DeepSeek, a Chinese AI lab, released a model called DeepSeek V4 Pro that performs on par with the best American coding models. But it costs roughly 10 times less to run, and it's free to download and use however you want. How? It uses something called mixture of experts. Instead of activating its entire massive AI brain for every single question, it only wakes up the small, specialized part it actually needs for that task. Like calling only the one specialist doctor you need instead of bringing in the whole hospital staff for every visit. The result is that companies are now routing everyday tasks to these cheap open models and saving the expensive premium AI only for their hardest, highest stakes problems. None of the AI boom works without physical chips. Think of chips as the actual brains inside every computer running AI. And right now, there simply aren't enough of them. TSMC, the Taiwanese company that manufactures the vast majority of the world's most advanced chips, is completely booked out. Some orders have wait times of up to 3 years. Companies like Apple, Nvidia, and AMD are all competing for the same limited factory capacity. This is why chip access has become just as important as having a good AI model. You can have the smartest AI in the world, but if you can't get the hardware to run it, it doesn't matter. There's a second, less talked about shortage: memory. If a chip is the brain, memory is like the desk space that brain needs to actually think fast. Without enough of it, even a powerful chip slows to a crawl. The newest type of memory, called HBM4, is essentially sold out for the rest of 2026. 2 companies, SK Hynix and Samsung, are racing to produce enough of it. And Nvidia, the company making most of the world's AI chips, depends heavily on both of them just to keep building its products. So even if the chip factories had extra capacity, the AI industry would still be bottlenecked by not having enough fast memory to pair with those chips. Because Western countries restrict China's access to the most advanced chip-making tools, China has doubled down on building its own supply chain from scratch. SMIC, China's largest chipmaker, is doubling its production of a slightly older but still capable chip technology, backed by billions of dollars in state investment. And Huawei's own AI chips, called Ascend, give Chinese companies a way to build and run AI without needing any American hardware at all. It's not as advanced as the cutting edge, but it means China isn't dependent on chips it's not allowed to buy. This is a textbook example of restrictions creating exactly the self-reliance they were meant to prevent. Before we look at specific countries, let's define a term you'll hear a lot: sovereign AI. It just means a country wants to own its entire AI system, top to bottom, its own chips, its own data centers, and its own AI models, instead of depending on other countries for any of it. Why does this matter? Because if you rely on a foreign company's AI to run your hospitals, banks, or power grid, that foreign government could theoretically cut off your access during a conflict or dispute. It's the same logic as a country wanting to grow its own food instead of relying entirely on imports. You want to be able to feed yourself even if trade relationships break down. That fear is now driving massive government investment worldwide. Let's look at 4 major players and their very different approaches. The United States is betting on dominance. Massive private capital, over $600 billion in infrastructure, plus export controls to keep the most advanced technology away from rivals. China is going the self-reliance route, building its own chip factories while also giving away powerful open AI models for free, which helps Chinese technology become the default option across developing countries. India is playing a different game entirely, building cheap, publicly subsidized computing power and AI models tuned to its many local languages, positioning itself as the world's AI inferencing hub, meaning the place that runs AI cheaply rather than the place that invents it first. And the European Union is focused on strict regulation and safety rules, but it's actually falling behind on funding. It gets only a small slice of global AI investment compared to North America. 4 very different bets on the same technology. Now for something that used to sound like science fiction, humanoid robots are actually working real jobs today. Tesla's Optimus robot has crossed 50,000 units built, working in Tesla's own factories, doing tasks like sorting battery parts and light assembly. Figure AI has placed over 10,000 robots into warehouses and car plants for other companies. And Boston Dynamics is now leasing out its fully electric Atlas robot for heavy industrial work. These robots cost around $25,000 to $30,000 to build, and they can work roughly 16-hour shifts with just a couple of hours to recharge. That's a huge shift from robots being lab experiments to robots being a real line item in a factory's labor budget. AI isn't staying on Earth either. India's space agency, ISRO, is preparing to launch a half-humanoid robot called Vyomitra on an uncrewed test flight, where it will monitor systems and simulate human responses before astronauts fly on future missions. And separately, some satellites now carry small AI chips that process camera and radar images directly in orbit, instead of beaming all that raw data back down to Earth first. Why does that matter? Sending huge amounts of raw satellite data down to Earth takes a lot of bandwidth and time. If the AI can process the image right there in space and only send down the useful conclusions, it's much faster and cheaper. It's a small but telling sign of how far AI everywhere really goes. AI is now deeply embedded in national defense. AI-driven cyber defense agents are protecting more than 150 critical infrastructure organizations worldwide, things like power grids and utilities, from attacks in real time. Militaries are also using AI to process sensor data instantly, plan logistics routes automatically, and analyze satellite images faster than any human team could. Because these tools are so powerful, governments are treating them as sensitive technology, meaning the most capable defense-related AI models are subject to the same kinds of export controls and security reviews as physical weapons. It's a reminder that AI capability and national power are becoming tightly linked. One of the most genuinely valuable uses of AI is in healthcare, especially in places that don't have enough doctors. Cure.ai, a company from India, has expanded its AI system for reading chest X-rays and CT scans to more than 105 countries, helping catch diseases early in places with severe radiologist shortages. Other tools are doing similar work. SigTuple analyzes blood samples automatically, Nearami screens for breast cancer using a non-invasive thermal scan, and Wysaw offers AI-guided mental health support that's actually approved by the UK's National Health Service. These aren't experiments anymore. They're deployed at scale, helping screen patients who might otherwise wait months to see a specialist or never see one at all. Let's talk about the human side of all this. Repetitive, transactional jobs, basic data entry, cashier roles, simple customer support are shrinking quickly as AI takes over those tasks. But here's the surprising part. When companies are asked what's actually holding back their AI plans, the answer isn't the technology itself. It's a lack of skilled people who know how to build, manage, and govern these AI systems. In fact, 82% of companies in Asia-Pacific report a serious shortage of specialized AI talent, even in regions producing huge numbers of STEM graduates every year. So schools and companies are scrambling to teach new skills. Things like managing AI data, writing good prompts, and designing multi-agent systems to close that gap. So as we close out, here are the 3 things that will decide who actually wins the AI race from here. First, turning AI into real results. The winners won't necessarily be whoever has the biggest model, but whoever can actually monetize AI properly and manage autonomous agents responsibly. Second, securing chips and compute. Since factories are booked out for years, having guaranteed access to hardware is now as strategically important as having a great AI model. And third, merging AI with the physical world. Robots in factories, AI in space, digital twins of entire industrial plants. The organizations and countries that successfully connect digital AI to real physical infrastructure are set to capture the largest share of economic value over the next few years. So here's the big takeaway. By August 2026, AI isn't a side project inside the tech industry anymore. It's becoming the operating system for the entire global economy. It's in how businesses price their products, in the chip factories racing to keep up with demand, in how nations plan their economic security, and now in robots and even in orbit. The same handful of forces, monetization, hardware access, and physical deployment, are shaping every part of this story at once. If you found this useful, hit subscribe for more clear, no-hype breakdowns of what's actually happening in AI. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.